Good to see everybody. Welcome back to our daily study of the weekly study of the Talmud. We are still in Tractate Rosh Hashanah, 3.5 years on, maybe 4. I think Rabbi Jeremy started this the year, slightly before I moved here. So it's like four years now, and we're steaming towards the end. We are doing really good. We are on the top of page 31a. We just got to the beginning of 31a, and I will share it with you. But one last thing, all the recordings are posted to Beth Shalom's YouTube page, which has the ungainly and ungodly title of youtube.com/channel/UCHGKRHBXSJH yada yada yada. You don't need it. The faster way to do it is to go to YouTube and look and type into the search engine Beth Shalom PGH, and you'll find all the videos. You can also subscribe, and then they'll pop up if you ever are on your YouTube page altogether. Today we have a really good, yes, Judy, you wanted to say something right as I was about to mute you. Try again. There you
exactly. Go. Okay. Daily Talmud would be fine with me.
Yeah, I would love a daily Talmud class.
Look, it could be heroin, it could be gambling,
yes,
it could be a lot of things.
I would do daily Talmud too, but it's not quite it's not quite practical as an organization of our scale, shall we say? But we'll get there. All right, let's keep going. Great crowd today. A lot of folks on here. I'm really glad to see that. Wonder if that's weather related or just people knowing that like we are moving towards the end, and that is really exciting. This week's text is really great. Last week was a little funky and dry because we got into an argument about some interesting things regarding whether you say and we're going to finish with this just so that we can catch up, whether you say the Shir Shel Yom, the scriptural reading from the Psalms for Yom Tov or for weekday. And there's the rabbis have a sharp debate about it. Rich, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to mention that Rabbi Adelson talked up this class quite robustly on Shabbat.
Oh, okay. The Talmud class?
Yeah.
Shock. Maybe he's trying to encourage people to attend for a siyum before they make a siyum, so they're not shocked. Which reminds me also, in a related note, today is the first of 2 days at which we will be davening the page at the end of class. I will stop the recording when we get to it, and then all of you should probably, for your own sanity's sake, if you want to, leave at 10:15 Eastern Standard Time. If you'd like to stick around and watch me mumble in Hebrew for about a half an hour, I'm going to be reading 3 more pages of Talmud today, and then 2 more pages of Talmud next week so that we can get to the end. Now, this is totally legal. Do not worry that I'm like sort of bending a law. I don't think there's anything more legitimate than working for 4 years on one tractate of Talmud and then speeding through the last 3 pages in order to make the finish line at the exact right moment for Pesach. This is how all siyumim are done all over the world. And ours is a little bit more legitimate in that most people create a kind of semi-fictional siyum 2 months in advance of the fast of the firstborns so that they can get to it. We are actually going to be really almost perfectly landing it. Sticking the landing like Simone Biles, baby. All right, here we go. We are at the end of 30b, and it says the following. I'm just going to speed read through the last line and the first line, and then I'll turn it over to Dee to read the English when we start the next piece, which starts a whole new, what's called sugya on its own. So this says, Iyam Shlema, Kol Hecha de Mistapka, Amrinan Shira Dechol, Hainu Kamar, Omro Vechoflo. Ela, Iyamrat Lo Amor Klal, My Omro Vechoflo. The Gemara explains this objection from the Recited. Granted, if you say that anywhere there is a doubt with regard to what to say, one recites the song of an ordinary week. This is the meaning of that which the Tana states. One recites the psalm for an ordinary weekday and then repeats it. However, if you say that in a case of doubt, no psalm is recited at all, what is the meaning of the clause? One recites it and repeats it. So the rabbis were getting into an argument earlier about whether one recites the psalm of the day or the psalm for Yom Tov on a strange situation where we're not entirely sure whether it is Rosh Hashanah or not because of the testimony of the witnesses or the late hour of the day. The rabbis have slightly changed topics, right? They're really talking about when you're not sure what day it is. Now, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, this is actually a legit problem at Beth Shalom, in that Beth Shalom in the time of year when it's too late for Mincha to be recited, but we do Mincha Mariv at 7, we do this funky little thing where instead we say a bunch of psalms. And one of the psalms we say is for the day. And I used to say the psalm for Wednesday. And then Ira Frank would tell me, no, Rabbi, you're supposed to do the psalm. I did this for a year. And then Ira Frank was, Rabbi, actually, you're supposed to do the psalm for Thursday. And I said, that's strange because it's Mincha of Wednesday. Why are we doing the psalm for Thursday? And he said, because that's what Rabbi Adelson says. And when Rabbi Adelson says something, I just do it, right? That's how Minyan works. He is what's called the Mara D'Atra, the master of the place. So anyhow, but it is arguable about which psalm you're supposed to say on that day. There is no force of halacha on that day anyways, because the whole idea is kind of semi-invented. We're going to do some things that would merit us to say Kaddish, even though we're not exactly saying a correct mincha. I always call it a hecher mincha, which is like a half mincha. Okay, let's finish the idea. And this is the end of the sugya, the end of an entire idea. Shani hatam de shira de yoma he. The Gemara rejects this argument. It is different here. As in any case, sing aloud is the psalm of the day, either because it was an ordinary Thursday or because it was Rosh Hashanah. However, there is no proof from here that in uncertain cases they would recite the psalm for an ordinary weekday, as it is possible they did not recite any psalm at all. So that is a semi-satisfactory conclusion to what we did yesterday. We're on to a new page. We're on to 31a. Why should we only celebrate siyumim when we could celebrate a siyum of a page? We should enjoy that. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to D. This is you see the little superscript S looking thing on the left in the English. This means that we're on to a whole new topic. I have really properly prepared because I'm a madman. This whole new sugya, and this is a fascinating sugya. The one warning I have to give you is we're continuing in the thread. The thought thread here is, what psalm do we say on what day? Okay, that's the only connection here, okay? But what they're going to do is have a really robust conversation about Shir Shel Yom, about the psalm of the day. So you have to reorient your brain a little bit and say, and do an Etch-a-Sketch, right? All right, my brain is now erased, and I no longer am thinking at all about Rosh Hashanah. We're not talking about Rosh Hashanah at all. We're changing topics into the question of what is the Shir Shel Yom? What is the psalm of the day? Which, as you probably have noticed if you have been around a conservative congregation, in the morning prayers, we say the psalm of the day. But in some of our older conservative prayer books, there's a little note that says you do this at the end of services. And so some synagogues do it at the beginning, and some do it at the end. And some prayer books have it in an annoying place where you have to flip back 30 pages. I grew up in rabbinical school, getting to Kaddish at the end of Shachrit, being told to do Shir Shel Yom, and then being told to flip all the way back to page 10 and thinking to myself, or page 19 or whatever, and thinking to myself, why did they make a prayer book where I have to flip back every single day? And the answer was because someone at JTS at some point decided that the proper place to put Shir Shel Yom was at the very beginning between Birkat HaShachar and Psukei Zimra. And then a whole bunch of other conservative rabbis said, that's not the way you do it. And that's not how they do it. That's not how they do it anymore. I don't know where they put it in the newer prayer book. So someone will maybe tell me. Maybe Rich knows, because Rich is our most regular davener in the community. All right, with that, D, I'm going to read the Aramaic.
The book here has it right before Aleinu.
That's where it should be. Oh, before Aleinu?
Before Aleinu. Then Aleinu and then Kaddish Avelim.
Ah, cool. All right. All right, here we go. Tanya, indicating a baraita. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Nishum Rabbi Akiva. Barishon Mahayu Omrim. Ladonai haaretz umloa. Tehevel v'yoshveva naki kapayim ubar levav. You all know this one. Al Shem shekana v'hikna v'shalit ba'olamo.
The Gemara explains on the topic of the daily Psalms recited by the Levites. It is taught in a baraita that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, on the first day of the week, Sunday, what psalms should the Levites recite? The psalm beginning with the phrase, the earth is tis the Lord's and its fullness, and commemoration of the first day of creation, because on that day he acquired the world and transferred it to man. And he was the only ruler in his world, as the angels were not created until the second day.
Okay, so what we've got here is fun. I've literally never learned this before and did not know the reasoning. And here you go. And not only that, we're going to see that this is a bit of celebrity Torah, right? And the thing about this is the question is being asked. There is a psalm for each day of the week that we say at Minyan. Why is that the psalm for each day of Minyan? And so the psalm for Sunday is Ladonai haaretz umloa from Psalm 24. Why is Psalm 24 the one that we say for this day? Because it commemorates the first day of creation. Now, the last piece I'll say before Rav Judy asks her question is, who is the person who lays out all 7 psalms for the 7 days of the week? And the answer is, it is none other than Rabbi Akiva himself, one of the great Tannaitic rabbis of the 3rd generation. Okay, really interesting. Additionally, it's kind of notable to see that we named the rabbi who names this altogether. A lot of baraitot or mishnayot are, especially the authoritative ones in which the rabbis all agree with, are done without a rabbi's name at all. So foreshadowing a little bit, perhaps, you can assume that if one rabbi's name is quoted here as the originator of the Psalms, we can assume that perhaps another rabbi is going to disagree later on, right? Okay, Rav Judy, go ahead.
So what's puzzling me, first of all, this may be for the first time that when it was read aloud in English, I actually first read only the bold print, and it makes it very different. So the only ruler in his world was added, the only, as the angels were not created until the second day was added.
Yes.
Since when do angels rule the world?
Boy, that is a great question. Generally, when Steinsaltz adds something, it is straight out of Rashi. So let's actually didn't think about that.
Okay.
But let me,
right.
well, I don't know. I'm going to actually answer that. I'm going to answer that on the fly by looking at Rashi. So Rashi's comment to, was it Shir Kana? Shalit ba'olamo is the Rosh is the thing. Ladonai haaretz. Kol hamazmur. Okay. Shekana shemaim va'aretz. Vehikana tevel yoshveva. Klomar kona kadei lahaknot. Vashalit ba'olamo yichidi. Shelo nivra'u hamalachim ad yom sheni. That's what Rashi says. So Rashi is the one who adds, as the angels were not created until the second day. So why is Rashi hung up on what day the angels were created? Because Rashi's hung up on that in Breshit, and Rashi's hung up on that in Vayikra. For the class I teach on Wednesday, we mentioned when we did Vayikra a couple of weeks ago that the Aleph is small in Vayikra. And the Rashi comment on that has entirely to do with issues around creation. So Rashi's really interested in creation, and Rashi's really interested in the angels and the angels' role in creation. And this is because Rashi's trying to understand how is the world created? What are the forces in nature that God directly controls, and what are the forces in nature that God kind of subcontracts out to the angels. And the last piece, of course, is a theological problem that Rashi needs to deal with early on, which is there is a moment in the creation story where God is referred to in the plural, right? And that is a big problem theologically for all of our rabbis. And the answer that some rabbis in the Gemara and Rashi agrees to, Joe, I'll call on you next, is that they're referring to God and the angels who are involved in creation. So it's maybe a little bit of sleight of hand, but it also might be, in my humble opinion, Rashi bringing back one of his own favorite Rashis here in Rosh Hashanah in order to double down on his opinion that the angels were created on day 2. Why did Steinsaltz? So Steinsaltz doesn't always include Rashi's comment here. I don't feel that it's necessary, but he does choose to do it here. All right, Joe, go ahead.
Judy, thank you for asking my first question. I do have a second one. It says that Rabbi Yehuda answered or said in the name of Rabbi Akiva.
Yes.
So off the top of your head, do we know if these two rabbis overlapped in space and time?
I'm glad you asked that. We're actually going to spend a little bit more time with Rabbi Nehemiah, who's going to come up a little bit later. But Rabbi Yehuda, so I'll show you this on the fly real quick. Hopefully you can see this. I'll stop share in order so that you can see it a little bit easier. And if you really want to see it, but we're actually going to look at this. Actually, let me share a screen from a different thing and it'll pop up. You asked a great question, Joe, because I'm actually prepared for it. The odds that I'm actually prepared for a question are usually pretty low. Hopefully what you see on your screen right now is a little chart. It's in Hebrew, so if your Hebrew is not great, I apologize. But this is a chart from the Aryeh Carmel Siyata de Gemara, which good Talmud students have. It's a book that's in English, but it's an easy guide to studying Talmud. It's like a cheat sheet. And what you see here is in the middle, you see Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus and Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, who are two early Tannaitic rabbis. I think they're like second or third generation. And they are both teachers of Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. And it says Bnei Brak, which we'll all study when we get to the Haggadah, right? The story of the rabbis who stayed up late in Bnei Brak, right? So if you look at the disciples of Rabbi Akiva, who were his students, Rabbi Nehemiah, who we're going to see later, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, not a very notable rabbi, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, very notable rabbi, in that there are great stories about him, and we have a whole holiday kind of centered around him at Lag BaOmer in Meron. Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, fairly well-known rabbi. You will all know him, all you Americans will know him from the Maxwell House Haggadah, because the spelling of the Maxwell House Haggadah had Rabbi Yossi as Rabbi Jose, which led to your Uncle Murray making nonstop jokes for years about the Mexicans in the Haggadah, because it's Rabbi Jose. It is not Rabbi Jose, it is Rabbi Yossi. Us rabbis are always annoyed at that, but Maxwell House made a choice and we all have to live with it. Okay. Then there's Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli, not a very big rabbi. That is the Rabbi Yehuda that we're talking about. So that's who we're talking about. Student of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, semi-well-known. And the most well-known rabbi of all the rabbis here is, other than Akiva himself, is Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is considered what's called the Stam of the Mishnah. He's the guy who states everything that is unattributed in the Mishnah. If there is a quote in the Mishnah that is directly attributed to Rabbi Meir and his name is used, we actually know something additional about it, which is that's a minority opinion. Anytime you hear Rabbi Meir's name used in the Mishnah, it is not accepted as force majeure of law. If we see a unattributed line in the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir wrote it, and it becomes the majority opinion, right? The Supreme Court of the United States still kind of works this way. Not exactly, but sort of, right? A dissent has an author and a name. A majority opinion is often authored in the name of all of the majority justices. Only one person writes it. I do believe there was a time, I could be wrong about this, when majority opinions were unattributed, even in the Supreme Court. But that might be, I may be making that up. Okay, but that's a little bit about it. Joe, does that answer your question pretty well? Cool, very good. The last thing I'll say is this. Rabbi Akiva is, the disciples of Rabbi Akiva are really important, because for those of us who remember the martyrology that we study at the high holidays, Rabbi Akiva is one of the famous rabbis who was tortured to death by the Romans for participating in the Bar Kokhba rebellion. So his disciples carry forward his Torah into the world. And so they're all very important. All right, with that, let's get back to the actual page of Talmud. We're going to learn actually a little bit more about Nehemiah when we get down the page, because Nehemiah is going to make an appearance. To answer Joe's question actually properly, instead of improperly, as I did just before, it says Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Akiva. I kind of missed that, so thank you for catching that, Joe, which is to say, these are the words of Rabbi Akiva, but they're relayed through Rabbi Yehuda. So when I said we're getting a glow up here, we're getting a little bit of celebrity Talmud. It's celebrity Talmud from Rabbi Akiva by way of his student, Rabbi Yehuda. All right, let's move on, because if you can anticipate, what's the psalm that comes after Sunday? It's the psalm for Monday, the one that we said this very morning. All right, Noreen, why don't you read to us in the English? I'll read the Hebrew of line 3. B'sheni mahayu omrim, gadol Adonai umhulal meod, al shem shechilek ma'asav umloch umalach alehem.
On the second day of the week, what psalm would the Levites recite? The psalm that begins, "Great is the Lord and highly to be praised in the city of our God, his sacred mountain." This is because on the second day of creation, he separated his works, dividing between the upper waters and the lower waters, and ruled over them as king. And this psalm speaks of Jerusalem as the city of a great king.
Great. So we have a hook for why day 2 is day 2. And it's a nice one, right? Great is the Lord and highly to be praised. You'll find that this one's probably the softest of all of them, right? Great is God because God divided the upper waters from the lower waters. Okay, it's not super compelling, but you kind of have to go with it, right? Let's keep going. Let's see, Dee already read, Noreen already read, Elisheva, why don't you read for us? And I'll do the Hebrew. Bashlishi hayu omrim, Elohim natzav ba'adat el, al shem shegila eretz b'chochmato, v'hechin tevel la'arato. Barivi'i hayu omrim, el nakamot Adonai, al shem shebara chama ulvana, v'atid lepar'a me'ovdehen.
On the third day of the week, they would recite the psalm beginning, "God stands in the congregation of God." Because on the third day of creation, God revealed the land in God's wisdom and thereby prepared the world for God's assembly that could now live on the dry land. On the fourth day of the week, they would recite the psalm beginning, "O Lord God, to whom vengeance belongs." Because on the fourth day of creation, God created the sun and the moon, and in the future, God will punish and take vengeance upon those who worship them.
Great.
Wow.
So day 3, Tuesday, right, has a funny little hook, which is God stands. The Hebrew for that is Elohim nitzav ba'adat el. If you study this psalm with a expert psalmist, as I did in rabbinical school, I studied with Dr. David Lieber, Alav Hashalom, who was one of the great, Dr. David Lieber is the editor of this Eitz Chaim Chumash. Learning with him was a great, great joy and a great, great pleasure. The man, he taught me at the age of 83, and he retired at the age of 84, and he passed away at the age of 90 or 91. They had a big gala dinner in his honor, which was really fun. So he taught me that this psalm is one of those problematic psalms that traditionalists have to kind of, paper over a little bit, right? God stands ba'adat el, in the congregation of God, right? That seems a little weird. It should be a little weird because the belief is Judaism back in the old days was not a proper full monotheistic religion, but was monotheistic in a kind of semi-polytheistic world. What does that mean? Most academics and scholars believe that Judaism wasn't monotheistic the way we know it. There is only one God in the world. It was monotheistic in the sense that we have one God, Jews have one God, other peoples have their own gods, right? But the Jews, we just have one God. And that explains this verse perfectly, right? God stands in the congregation of gods, plural, right? In the congregation of, right? Imagine that there is a senate of divine beings, and the Egyptians have a dozen, representatives, and the Babylonians have 3 or 4 different representatives, and the Zoroastrians have, the good and the evil. They've got 2 representatives. We're the only people that only have one God in the congregation of gods, right? That's the belief that academics had back in the day. Now, what does this say? God stands in the congregation of God. They spin it out to say something different. That like God's house is called Adat El, right? Interesting. Nice name for a synagogue, perhaps. Okay. But the key word, I was just riffing anyways. The key word here that we really like is the word nitzav, right? Nitzav, to stand, right? And what do you need to stand? You need dry land. And what day of the week did God create dry land? Day 3. And that's why we recite this psalm. It's kind of silly, but I think it's very sweet. All right. Day 4 is adorable, right? Day 4 is my favorite psalm of the weekday psalms because it's the psalm of anger, right? I will bring down fire and brimstone on all the evildoers, right? Until a pit be dug for the wicked, right? I love the psalm for day 4 because it's angry and it's vengeful. And Rabbi Goodman likes anger and vengeance upon evildoers. The only challenge is that the translation here, the way they spin it here, is a little bit morally and theologically challenging for me, but take it or leave it. It's just the rabbi's opinion. They are hooking the "O God of vengeance, appear and bring down a can of whoop ass on the evildoers." They assign this to day 4 because on day 4 they create the sun and the moon, and the sun and the moon are 2, especially in Tractate Avodah Zarah, in the Talmud, are 2 things, 2 of the symbols that are very frequently associated with idol worship, right? So there are lots of idolaters who worship the sun and the moon, and therefore, because day 4 is the day in which we create the sun and the moon, we assign the psalm that talks about vengeance to that day. It's a little bit of a reach, but I actually think it's a clever move, right? You're trying to make a hook that harmonizes all 6 days of the week to the psalms that were chosen. I think the fact that they're a little stretchy, you have to kind of like make a move, like, the word stand appears, and there's dry land on day 3, and therefore that's why. I think the fact that they're stretchy very strongly implies that Rabbi Akiva is not literally telling us the answer. He's not saying like these were the reason the priests picked these. He's doing a little bit of a Devar Torah here. He's doing a bit of a stretch. Okay, Elisheva and then Rav Judy.
It just begs the question for me, why God creates something which he knows is going to lead people to do the wrong thing. That seems counterproductive.
Yes. And the answer from a theologian who doesn't have time to deal with it is free will. But it's a great question, right?
Why lay out temptation?
Yeah. Why are there so many wonderfully tempting things for which we can?
We do badly enough without having temptations strewn in our path.
Yeah. What would a universe look like without a moon and a sun? Go, Rav Judy.
it would be pretty dark without the sun. Hello.
Right.
That's.
I'm sure God could figure out another way to
all right,
provide light.
Okay, I don't find that. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. I think that what the rabbis were reacting to was the paganism. This was before Islam came into being.
Oh,
When
long before.
they were debating this, and in that part of the world, people worshipped the sun and the moon. So that's what they're reacting to. They're reacting to the reality of their own life.
Nice.
And I think it stretches it all. I think it's a very basic thing. You're living in a time when the majority of people all around you are worshiping idols, particularly the sun was probably in many of those cultures the chief god, and then and then God is angry because God created it.
Nice.
God created these objects, and there's only one God. So I think that I don't see it. What my only problem with your comments, and I'm getting all excited, which is good, is that I don't think it's a stretch.
Yeah, that's fair. I want to comment on some of the chat comments. Elanit, actually, let's go before Elanit. Olivia threw into the chat way back when that Rashi is integrated with Sepharia. That is correct, except when it's not, which is I read a couple of Rashis that Steinsaltz doesn't really include because they don't really clarify or move forward the dialogue. So in general, they're integrated, and he reads according to Rashi, but sometimes Rashi doesn't really add anything. Sometimes it's too simple.
No,
so
you misunderstand what I meant.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is if you click on this block of text,
Yeah.
and then it'll show up on the side like
Yes.
Commentary, and
Yep.
then you click on the Rashi there. That's what I meant.
Yes, absolutely. If you're not just staring at my screen, you can see that you can look at Rashi. Very good. Yeah, you're right. If you use Steinsaltz, if you use the Sepharia itself, it's really a powerful tool. Thank you, Olivia. I appreciate that. Eleni was making a joke off of when is Minyan over? Yeka moves to a new town on a Tuesday. He goes to Minyan, gets home at 7:45. Next day, he leaves for shul and says to his wife, I'll be home at 7:46, right? So good, very good. Eleni doesn't think the joke was worthy of repeating out loud. Too late. Let's keep going. We're on to day 5. We're steaming down the page, which is good, although forward motion is not the main purpose of Talmud study. B'chamishi hayu omrim, har ninu le'elohim uzenu, al shem shebara ofot v'dagim v'shavach lishmo. B'shishi hayu omrim, Hashem malach geut lavesh. That's my favorite psalm because it's the shortest. Actually, it's my second favorite psalm because Wednesday. Al Shem shegamar malachto umalach alehem. B'shvi'i hayu omrim mizmor shir leyom hashabat. Leyom shekulo Shabbat. All right, Joe, do you mind reading the English for us in here on the 5th day?
Just needed to unmute. On the 5th day of the week, the Levites would recite the psalm beginning, sing aloud to God our strength, because on the 5th day of creation, he created birds and fish to praise his name. On the 6th day of the week, they would recite the psalms beginning, the Lord reigns, he is clothed with majesty, because on that day, he completed his labor and ruled over all of creation in full glory. On the 7th day of the week, Shabbat, they would recite the psalm beginning, a song for the day of Shabbat, as the future world will be a day that is all Shabbat.
Great. Okay, so we've got 5, 6, and 7. No big surprise here for those of us who are either occasional or regular Minyan goers, which is these are the songs we use. I think the interesting thing here is what I was anticipating was that we were going to find, and this is a thing you find throughout Talmud, I was anticipating we would find something that was actually different from what we do. And then we'd have to puzzle and say, why is this different? For instance, yesterday, I taught a class on how to host your Seder. And one of the things I noted, someone, in fact, Dee, your daughter asked, what are the things we absolutely have to do at the Seder? And what are the things we can skip if we want to? And I threw out a couple things. And one of the examples of things that you can skip, which you will be shocked at, is, and when I say you can skip, I'm saying halachically, it's not literally essential this way. One of the things you can skip is manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Why can you skip manishtana halayla hazeh? Because the Talmud in the 10th parak of Pesachim, Ilanit, I brought up your name when we mentioned this, we'll get to the 5 questions. And some of you are pausing and saying, the 5 questions? Rabbi, there are only 4 questions. Well, in the Talmud, there are actually 5. And the 5 questions, 3 of them, though, are the ones we use. One of them we dump completely, and one of them has changed significantly. So there are some significant points in which the liturgy that this is my connection to what we just read. The liturgy that we say is not actually what the Talmud tells us we're supposed to say. The cool thing about the thing we just read is Rabbi Akiva just dropped 7 Psalms that we're supposed to read according to the 7 days. And they are actually the 7 Psalms that we actually say. So next time you go to Minyan, someone says, why do we say this Psalm? The answer is Rabbi Akiva, which is really cool, I think. It's also nice to know the origins of certain prayers in our tradition. The strange thing about this is most of the prayers we say, if you want to know the hook for why we say them, they're in Tractate Brachot, which is the logical place to put stuff about blessings. But here we have them randomly thrown into Rosh Hashanah. It's possible they're also in Brachot, but these are also in Brachot, but I don't think so. I'm looking at the side of the page to see if there's a Masorah Shas, and it doesn't seem to imply these are also in Brachot. Last thing I'll note, which is interesting, because this is foreshadowing, this is telling you where we're going to be heading next. The last one is really interesting. On the 7th day of the week, they would recite the Psalm, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat, a psalm for Shabbat, as L'Yom Shekulo Shabbat. What that means is, in the future, and this is based on an idea that we're going to look at again, that appears in the book of Isaiah, in the future, none of us will have to go to work. Every day will be like Shabbat, right? The food will just magically appear on our tables. We will not have to pay the heat and the light bill, right? Duquesne will provide us electricity for free. It'll be, they'll just be relaxing, singing Zmiros, learning Torah, and all that stuff. Of course, in the days in the future, according to the rabbis, all the non-kosher things will probably be kosher again. So we can have lobster thermidor for Friday night dinner in addition to this. And Friday night will have no meaning since every day will be Shabbat. It's lobster thermidor 7 days a week, people, and no work days anymore, right? No more Mondays. Yay. All right. Joe, you wanted a question. Go ahead.
It's more like a comment, but this is an interesting paragraph. It would take hours to unpack it. I'll just note, following up on your comments, that God completed his labor on the 6th day, rather than finishing the creation so that every day would be Shabbat. That's kind of really interesting.
Yeah, well said. I'll also, in case you were kind of skated over it, because I skated over it too, I was kind of like, these are weird, because these hooks are very, they're light. They're not strong hooks. They're not like, it absolutely says this. So the hook for 6 is pretty, is also kind of light, which is Adonai Malach Geut Lavesh. God is dressed in Geut. Geut is like pride. Here it translates it as majesty, but to be Ga'ava is in modern Hebrew is arrogant. But ga'ava is also pride in modern Hebrew. So to be proud of your accomplishments and to be incredibly arrogant is basically the same word in Hebrew, which is kind of a challenge in linguistically of trying to say like, I'm proud of my work and trying to express that without implying to people like, I'm very arrogant about my accomplishments, right? They're the same word. The word here is Adonai Malach Ga'ut Lavesh, right? God is clothed in pride. And the question that the rabbi is basically answering is, well, why would God be very proud? And the answer is because on the sixth day, God finished creating all the things. And that's why we say this psalm for that day. The psalm doesn't say like, and I created man and man is wonderful and glorious and da-da-da-da. It just says, I was very proud. And so Akiva says, what could God have been proud of? Finishing 6 days of creation, right? It's time to clock out from the plant, like Fred Flintstone, who clocks out and goes yabba dabba doo and slides down the end of the brontosaurus. That's God right now. God is very happy about all that God accomplished in the rock quarry, and so God slides down the brontosaurus tail. There are literally 0 people in this room right now who know what I'm talking about. You all need to go back and watch the Flintstones. Okay, the Flintstones was
I
great.
know.
Elisheva knows. Elani's too young to remember the Flintstones. Okay, moving on. Olivia is definitely too young to know the Flintstones, which is fine, right? But these are the Flintstones. If we go back and look at Flintstones with modern 21st century eyes, it's an incredibly, cringe-worthy cartoon, which is full of misogyny and stupidity, and also there are 0 characters who are of color. So it's But anyways, now I'm being homiletical. All right, let's go on to the dispute, which is halfway down the page. I need a new reader. Who's still available? Rich has not commented, and Paula, you'll get number 7, okay? Amar, Rabbi Nechemia, Ma ra'u hachamenu lechalek bein haprakim halalu. Ela, berishon shekana v'kineh v'shalit ba'olamo, b'sheni shechilek ma'asav umloch alehem, b'shlishi shigila eretz b'chochmato v'hachin tevel la'adato.
Rabbi Nehemiah said, what did the sages see that led them to distinguish between these chapters, as they interpret the Psalms recited on the 6 weekdays as referring to the past, whereas the Psalm recited on Shabbat is referring to the future? Rather, all of the Psalms refer to the past. The first 6 are explained above. On the first day, the reason is that God acquired the world and transferred it to humans, and God was the only ruler in God's world. On the second day, the reason is that God separated God's works and ruled over them as king. On the third day, the reason is that God revealed the land in God's wisdom and thereby prepared the world for God's assembly.
There are times at which I am not particularly useful to all of you, except that I am the convener of this class and the guy who controls the Zoom, right? Because, I'm okay at Talmud, but I never proclaim to be the world's greatest Talmudist. The ubiquity of me in this week's learning is that I went through and made sure to, with a fine-tooth comb, double check that how Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Nehemiah lined up. And the answer is, spoiler alert, the first 6 days, Akiva and Nehemiah don't say anything differently. Their explanations of why these days are lined out the way they are identical for the first 6 days, which begs the question, why would Rabbi Nehemiah repeat verbatim exactly what Rabbi Akiva says for the first 6 days? It's day 7 that we're going to disagree with. So hold that thought about what's different about day 7. The answer, I don't have a good answer for. The best answer I could possibly give you is in a system of baraitot, right, of oral sayings that were handed down and then edited together. It's nice to possibly have the idea that Rabbi Nehemiah has one set and Rabbi Akiva has another set, and 6 out of 7 of the things they say are identical, meaning the rabbis found it worthwhile to reprint Nehemiah and Akiva side by side, even though 90% of what they say is identical. So if you're wondering, did Nehemiah, the most important thing is, did Nehemiah just say anything different than what Rabbi Akiva said? No. The only difference is there's a word rather, Ela. And Ela implies that there is going to be a disagreement between Nehemiah and Akiva. There is a very short line here that says all of the Psalms refer to the past. We don't really know that yet. We'll only know that in 2 more paragraphs when we read down the page. So that clarifies, like, slow your roll, hold on, the spoiler is coming later. Rav Judy, you wanted to say something?
What I'm puzzled about is on the first, I'm just going to read the bold print, on the first that he acquired and transferred and was ruler of the world. So what's added in the other print is to man. Well, that makes sense, even if it does, that's understood. But that's interesting because man was not created until later.
Yeah.
So that's kind of puzzling why Nehemiah interpreted it that way.
I don't think
The
this
first
is
day psalm.
so. The Hebrew is the same as
Yeah.
Akiva and Nehemiah. So if it's anybody's translation, and that word of transferred it to man is not in bold, so that implies that it is Rashi. So I'm looking back to
Yeah,
see
but transferred is in bold and transferred.
Yeah. Ladonai haaretz kol ha-mazmor shekana shemayim ba'aretz v'hikne tevel liyoshve ba klomar kone kedei lahaknot. I don't see anything here that says the word man. So I'm not.
No, but it says transferred. Who else would it have been transferred to?
Yeah, I don't have that word.
So that's just interesting,
Right.
because
Yep.
it's out of order.
Yeah.
It's a little bit unexplainable, I guess.
Rav Judy asks the best kind of question, the one that I can't find an answer for. So good job. It's a great question, and it pokes a bit of a hole here. It's interesting that the rabbis don't go in this direction, which is really interesting. Okay, let's keep going, because you'll see what they do actually find interesting and what they do object to. I think I said that Paul is going to read this section. Paul, are you good to go? Great. Okay. Shirevi shebara chamal ulavana ve'atid lepar'a me'ovdehen v'chamishi shebara ofot v'dagim leshabeach lishmo b'shishi shegamar malachto umalach alehem b'shvi'i al shem sheshabat.
On the 4th day, the reason is that he created the sun and the moon, and in the future he will punish those who worship them. On the 5th day, the reason is that he created birds and fish to praise his name. On the 6th day, the reason is that he completed his labor and ruled over all of creation. However, on the 7th day, the reason is that he rested from his work, as the phrase, a psalm, a song for the day of Shabbat, is referring to the first Shabbat of creation.
Okay, so I'll say it very clearly to tell you the difference, because we have to scroll back the page. This is where Akiva and Nehemiah disagree. So Akiva's answer for the 7th day is Leyom Shekulo Shabbat. Leyom Shekulo Shabbat. Yom Shekulo Shabbat is the idea that there will be a future day in which all 7 days are Shabbat. And that is looking forward into the future, whereas the previous 6 Psalms look at the past, right? They look at the day of creation 5,782 years ago, right? Rabbi Nehemiah's answer is Al Shem She Shabbat, right? Which is, it's also looking backward, right? So Rabbi Akiva is looking to the future, and Rabbi Nehemiah says, no, all 7 Psalms look at the past. We're going to clarify that in the next verse. Olivia, do you mind reading for us?
Happy to.
Cool. I'll do the Aramaic and you will do the English. And so we have an Aramaic disagreement. Oh, before we get to that, I wanted to show you one additional page about Rabbi Nehemiah. I pulled this from a book that I have, which isn't my favorite of the books about the Amoraim and the Tanaim, but is a good one. It's called the Encyclopedia of Talmudic Sages by Grisham Bader. It's a it's an Aronson book. Aronson publishers are Orthodox; they're traditionalists.
I love that book.
I do too. What I was going to say is it's not a scholarly academic book, meaning they assume that whatever the Talmud says about the rabbis is literally true. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, because there are times when, you're reading down the page and it'll say Rabbi so-and-so was known for this, 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 and this. And then I'll say Rabbi so-and-so also had magical, miraculous healing powers. And they say that like the same way, like you or I would say a traffic light goes from green and yellow and red. Like it's a fact for them, right? Rabbi so-and-so could fly on a magical horse into the hereafter, like is no big deal. Olivia jokes and says, "You doubt?" And the answer is, yes, I went to conservative rabbinical school. All the magic and wonder in the universe has been beaten out of me by 5 years of academic Talmud study. Okay, so I'm going to share screen with you, and I'm going to show you this other thing from that book, which is, I apologize if it's a little long and stretchy. I'll read this to you because I don't know how easy it is for your eyes to see this. Rabbi Nehemiah and the other disciples of Rabbi Akiva. The last disciples of Rabbi Akiva began the work of compiling the Mishnah as they received it from their master. One of these was Rabbi Nehemiah, who participated in the first gathering of scholars after the death of Emperor Hadrian. He was also present at the convocation at Usha. Usha is one of the places that Sanhedrin lived after the destruction of the temple, although he did not actively participate in it, right? Little is known of the life and activities of Rabbi Nehemiah, except for the fact that he was very poor and a potter by trade. The name of his father is also unknown, although it is certain that he was a prominent scholar because Rabbi Nehemiah once quoted his opinion in a legal matter. Rabbi Nehemiah opposed the methodology of Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, one of his fellow students of Rabbi Akiva, and contradictory reports concerning his personality circulated in later generations. One opinion claimed that all anonymous statements in the Tosefta were those of Rabbi Nehemiah. Interesting. When the book of genealogy of noble families of Jerusalem was discovered, it was found that Rabbi Nehemiah was a descendant of Nehemiah of Thershata. Yes, that's the first time I've ever heard of Nehemiah of Thershata. Another belief current in later generations maintained that Rabbi Nehemiah was really the Tana, Rabbi Nehorai. In explanation, it was said that he was called Nehorai because he shed light on doubtful legal questions. So that's a little bit about Rabbi Nehemiah. He's a potter. He's a student of Akiva. Yeah, he's a cool dude. All right, we'll keep going. Back to our Talmud. Olivia had a comment. I want to see that. What did Olivia say? Got to say, Talmud study has only ever filled me with magic and wonder. Sorry, it was all wrung out of you. Olivia, it was not wrung out of me. I'm mostly kidding. I literally am teaching a class at JJEP, which is the religious school here. I was at your synagogue or your former synagogue. I'm not sure if you're there anymore, Olivia, of Rodef Shalom, teaching, and I'm doing a 4-part class for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders called Magic and Superpowers in the Talmud. It is very much a very Olivia friendly class. So anyways.
Oh yeah, that's my stuff.
Yeah, you know what texts I taught, right? First
I would love to see them.
Yeah, well, you know them all. They're all back pocket for you. They are the Tanur Shalachnai was the first 2 classes, and yesterday was Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave. So these are greatest hits
for sure.
But, having grown up Reform, I only saw Talmud once in my entire religious school education. So I know that like you can play the hits and the kids will love it. All right.
Sure. I certainly wasn't taught growing up that in that Talmud was stories of rabbis doing magic.
That's right. Or superpowers. We've been juxtaposing them against Marvel and DC superheroes because it allows me to show clips of Wolverine and Cyclops and stuff like that. So yeah, I've taught kids. I know.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta figure out a hook to get them to religious school. All right. Rav Judy left. So let's go back to Elisheva, why don't you read this?
I'm here if you want me.
No, I'll get you next. Elisheva,
Sorry.
You're good. You're up to do 8. The kamiflagi de. Oh wait, Olivia. I'm sorry, Olivia. You were gonna read, and then I stopped to talk about Rabbi. So it's Olivia. It's your turn. So it'll go Elisheva and then Judy. The kamiflagi be Rav Katina. De Amar Rav Katina. Shita alfe shana have alma v'chad charuv. Shenemar. V'niskav Adonai levado bayom hahu. Amar Abaye, Trei charuv, shene'emar, yachyenu yomayim. Go ahead, Olivia.
The Gemara comments, and these Tanaim disagree with regard to a statement of Rav Katina. As Rav Katina said, the world will exist for 6,000 years, and for 1,000 years it will be destroyed. As it is stated from Isaiah, and the Lord alone shall be exalted on that day. And 1 day for God is 1,000 years. Oh, okay. As indicated in the verse, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past. Sounds like good proof to me. Psalms 94. Rav Katina's statement is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Inversely, Abaye said, the world will be destroyed for 2,000 years. As it is stated, after 2 days, he will revive us, from Hosea. According to the opinion of Abaye, that the destruction would be for 2 days, there is no connection between the future world and the day of Shabbat, which is only 1 day.
Okay, so we're going to finish on this because, and it's a good place to end, but in a pretty weird place. They're going to change. We didn't quite finish the sugya, which is okay, but they're going to change the direction that they go in next. What did they just end with? They ended with a thing that you may, have heard of at some point in your life, which is this very strange apocalyptic idea that floats around in some ultra-Orthodox communities, or has been floated in the kind of way that there was a movie about the Mayan calendar, that the Mayan calendar apparently thought that the world was going to end in 2012. There was even a movie about this, about disasters and whatever. The rabbinic equivalent of the Mayan calendar ending in 2012 is the year 6000. That the year 6000, because a day is like 1,000 years in God's eyes, is that when God finishes with 6 days of creation, meaning 6,000 years of the existence of the world, on day 7, i.e. year 6001, God will destroy the world, right? And the basis for this is this opinion of Rav Katina, who thinks he is holding like Rabbi Akiva in this respect. He takes a verse that says, God alone shall be exalted on this day, implying human beings will not exist, which I think is a bit of a stretch, but okay. And then adding to that, this other verse that is very well known in the rabbis, so well known they don't even bother to quote it, which is to say, for 1,000 years in your sight is as yesterday when it is past, and implying that the world will end in year 6001, right? So I would say, don't buy any land or property on a 300-year lease, people, because the back end of those 100 years, you're not going to really get any usage out of it, right? We're in year 5782. So there's only like, what is that? 218 more years left in the universe, to the universe. And after that, we're all toast, which I don't plan on living 218 years, so it's good, but bummer for my great-grandchildren who will cease to exist. I say that tongue-in-cheek because, again, I think predictions of the demise of the universe based on one strange comment in the Gemara that one Amoraic rabbi made seems a bit of a stretch, but I will say, if you were wondering, if you've all ever wondered two things: one, where do the Psalms of the day, where does Shir Shel Yom come from? And two, where is the basis in Talmud for why the world will be destroyed in the year 6000? You have learned both today. So with that, I hope everybody has a really great day. We're going to stop the recording.